Hi, it's Christian. I'm doing my project on the muscular system, and it's actually pretty complicated. So I'm going to start with organs actually in the muscle, and then I'll continue with how it actually works. So we're going to talk about the different organs and different tissues used for the skeletal muscle. Now, the skeletal muscle is usually the most common of the muscles. It is voluntary, so it is told, you could tell it what to do. And it's usually hooked up to a bone. That's why we use it for so many things, and we know it. So the other two muscles are cardiac muscle and the smooth muscle, but those are involuntary, and we don't get to pick when we get to use them. The body already chooses to use them. Now, for skeletal muscles, first we could talk about the muscle fiber, which is the basic unit, the building block of the skeletal muscle. It contracts on impulse from the nerve, which is sent through the central nervous system. And one muscle can consist of hundreds and even thousands of muscle fibers acting for a specific purpose. Oh, what was that? Alright. Okay, sorry, I'm gonna fix that. And next is the epimysium, which is right here. It is the connective tissue that surrounds the whole muscle. So you can see it's the outer layer. And then after that, we can even go farther for the fascia. The fascia is right here. It's called a fascicle right here. It encloses the muscles together, separating them in groups so they can carry out a specific function. And it also bonds the bones, the joints, and the muscle together. So you can see this is just a little piece taken out of that. It's just a little piece of this part of the muscle right here. And the fascia separates them into groups so they can carry out a specific function, as you can see right there. And lastly, I'd like to talk about is the endomysium, which is these little microfibers right here. Muscle fibers, they look really small. And this surrounds the muscle fiber together. So you can see right here, all these little things right here are surrounded by endomysium. And the fascia surrounds a group of endomysiums together. Okay, now we can talk about how this actually works. So each muscle, like I said, contains muscle fibers, which are specialized cells that their special force is contraction. They can contract when they're told to do so. So for the skeletal system, we can make voluntary movements. In the central nerve, when we want to do something, the central nervous system sends an impulse through the nerves, which are basically directions on how the muscle should act. And it's usually accompanied by an artery and a blood cell, as we see right here. The blood cells are actually labeled right there. So, once the muscles receive their directions from the central nervous system, they will coordinate with some protein filaments called microfibrils, which are thin and thick protein filaments. You can see they're called actin and myosin. You can see in these pictures this, myosin and actin. And when a muscle is relaxed, the myosin is not bound to the actin. But when it is stressed, the myosin binds to the actin in these binding sites. We call each of these little actins binding sites. And when they bind, they use ATP to form a cross bridge together that pulls the actin toward the myosin. And when it is done with one binding site, then it chooses another binding site. And it keeps choosing binding sites until the actin is completely contracted toward the myosin. Now we can talk about types of muscular organs. Alright, so like I said, we have the skeletal muscle, which is voluntary. We can pick and choose when we want to use it. It's responsible for many movements of the bones, and it's controlled by the central nervous system. The basic unit of this is a muscle fiber, like I said, but it has many nuclei, and it's usually formed in transverse streaks, which means it creates a right angle. Alright, let me pause this for a second. And then after the smooth muscle, or after the skeletal muscle, is the smooth muscle, and it's involuntary, which means that we don't get to pick and choose when it's used. The body already chooses for us. And they're like hollow organs. You can call them like blood vessels, bladder muscles. They're under the control of an autonomic nervous system, which we don't get to control. This basic unit is like a spindle-shaped muscle fiber, But the difference is that it has one central nuclei. It doesn't have many nuclei like the muscle fibers in the skeletal muscle. And then lastly is the cardiac muscle. That's also involuntary. It's part of the autonomous, wow, what is wrong with me today? Nervous system. It's also involuntary. We can't do anything about it. The heart just keeps pumping. It's found in the heart. We can't control when our heart pumps and when our heart does not. It's striated like the skeletal muscle, which means it makes right angles at the axis. It acts independently of all other muscle fibers. So it has one single nucleus. Okay, next slide. Why isn't it working? Now we can go to interesting facts. So, some of the interesting facts about muscles, actually really interesting. All of our movement is actually due to contraction. When we move an arm, when we lift weight, even when we do a pull-up in this picture, the muscles are contracting together to create that movement. Another interesting fact is that actually from contraction, from working out, 85% of our body heat is actually from our muscles. Every time we contract, we create heat, which is actually our metabolism. Based on metabolism, that's how we burn off food. It's because of our heat, and that's why 80% of our body heat is actually from our muscles. And the last interesting fact is that there are over 600 muscles in our body, which is like roughly 40% of our actual body weight. So that's pretty interesting that most of our food, or most of our, not most, but a lot of our weight is actually due to our muscles. So now we can talk about harmful effects when these muscles do not work properly. Now, there's a lot of diseases. There's inflammatory myopathy is called polymyositis, which is inflammation and increasing weakness in their skeletal muscles. They can't function properly. Another you've heard of arthritis, which is joint mobility. The muscles in the joints do not work the proper way. And there's also metabolic muscle disorders, which are distorted chemical reactions from the metabolism when you're drawing energy from your food. They don't metabolize properly. That's why we talk about 85% of our body heat is from metabolism. When our bodies don't contract properly, the metabolism doesn't work properly. So now after the diseases, we can go to their symptoms and treatment. A lot of people, weakness, fatigue, slurred speech, joint pain like arthritis. You can even, if the muscles in the throat aren't even working, you could have difficulty swallowing or breathing as well. And treatments, there's steroids, medications, and people actually use mild chemotherapy to help with joint damage and muscle damage and it not working properly. In the actual future of this disease and of the muscles not working as they should, there's something called electromyography, which is muscle electrical activity that figures out the causes of paralysis. And it could be actually, if they develop it, it could be actually a way to effectively treat paralysis and other forms of muscle disorders and diseases. So that was my presentation. I hope you liked it. These are my works cited. Like I said, the way the muscle works is actually pretty complicated, knowing all the organs that actually play a part in how it contracts. And I just hope you liked it. Hope you liked it, especially Mr. Dillon. We're going to miss you. We love you. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Dillon.